Hey, Acts of the Apostles, this is week 2, and today we're going to start the process of exegeting Acts properly. Last week, you spent some time looking at the requirements for class and looking at all of the things that are going to be coming due between now and the end of the semester. You also had some time to do some reading. You had some time to read Acts chapters 1 and 2. You had time to read the commentaries by Gonzalez and Amer and Williams, Amer being me. You had the time to look at the Tiffany and Ringy, which was on reserve at the library in electronic form. And that was to influence your paper for this week. And so all of that should have been brought in to the paper that you wrote on your pericope. And I'm looking forward to reading them. They're due today at 6. Now we're going to start the actual process of exegesis in the forums and talking about the process of exegesis and about Acts of the Apostles in the forums. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about two streams of thought simultaneously. The first stream of thought is the stream of thought that Tiffany and Ringy represent, and that's the stream of thought of exegesis, and specifically of interpreting the text. The word exegesis means to interpret, and it's a Greek word. It comes from the Greek word exegeomai, and it means to lead out or to interpret. We enter this stream with ourselves and with the observation that fundamentally changed biblical studies about 40 years ago. The observation that who you are affects the way that you interpret the text. Now I'm going to let the big ideas person say some more about that in the forum, and I'll have all of those persons listed in the forum in my first post in the forum to you. After 6 o'clock you can go in there and start posting. Starting with where you are, with who you are and how that affects the way you read the text, engages two kinds of intellectual tasks. And those are the intellectual task of remembering where you've come from, remembering where you've heard Acts 1 and 2 before, remembering how you have understood the biblical text before, and understanding where some of the things that you think about the biblical text comes from. And that takes place together in the forums. It also takes place individually in your papers. Now, those two kinds of tasks, remembering and understanding, are the baseline for learning, but they're not the only piece. And so, in addition to the work of remembering and understanding, the Tiffany and Ringy chapter engages you in the work of applying the methods that they have brought forward, and engages you in the work of evaluating and justifying your reading of a particular text. In your individual papers, it's your reading of your pericope, and in the forum, we're going to do the same thing in Acts chapters 1 and 2. So what I want you to do in the forum is take the Tiffany and Ringy reading and engage Acts chapters 1 and 2 with it. Include in your engagement as you go the reading by Williams, the reading by Amer, the reading by Gonzalez as they're appropriate. So it's not just, well, I feel about Acts chapters 1 and 2 such and such. But Tiffany and Ringy ask us to look in a particular way at who we are. And so using Tiffany and Ringy's questions and their method, engage Acts chapter 1 and 2, and then talk about how that's different from or similar to what you read in my piece or in Justo Gonzalez's piece or in Demetrius Williams' piece. So I really want you to integrate the two kinds of learning. And that's that second stream. I said we were looking at two streams simultaneously. The first stream is the interpretive stream. The second stream is the information about Acts. The information about Acts that you read in my article, which will be published later this year as a chapter of the newest version of the Women's Bible Commentary, that you read in Demetrius Williams' article, which is in True to Our Native Land, and which you read in Justo Gonzalez's first 55 pages of Acts of the Apostles. As part of the forum, the other thing I want you to ask yourself is, how are these writers the same, and where are they different? What would you critique about what each one of these writers says? What don't you agree with? What do you agree with? How do you read it differently? And as you're doing that, you're going back to the Tiffany and Ringy and saying, where am I getting that reading from? Is that something I learned from my pastor? Is that something I learned from my school? Is that something I learned from my church? Where is that coming from that I am approaching the text in that particular way? So what you're seeing from this video is I'm not going to give you the answers. There's no such thing as the right answer here. What I'm trying to get you to do is to think critically about how to engage each other in the forums, how to engage each other in discussion, and how to think critically about the work that you're doing in these papers. Excuse me, I've got something in my throat. The work that you're doing in these papers. So that this week, as you're reading George Atchley's thing on ideology, you can be looking at those ideology questions in light of the next chapters of Acts that are assigned and doing the same thing. How do we see Luke acting in ideological ways, writing in ideological ways? What's Luke's ideology? Who is he allowing to speak? Who is he silencing? And so on. As you move into next week's reading, you can begin to look at that. Now, you don't need to address that in this week's forum because that's the reading for next week. So what you're going to do in the forum is you're going to start a conversation just as we did this week. Probably won't be about tarrying at the altar. There's nothing wrong with tarrying at the altar, but Acts chapters 1 and 2 will be about that text and about how we're engaged in that text in light of the Tiffany and Ringy readings. So each one of you will have a role. If you don't have a specifically assigned role, you are a responder or elaborator. You're going to respond to what's posted and elaborate and make it stronger. Obviously, one of you is going to be the big ideas person. You're going to highlight the big ideas both in the Tiffany and Ringy and in the Acts of the Apostles readings. So you're going to say the big idea in Justo Gonzalez's pieces, the big idea in Amer's reading, the big idea in Williams's reading, and the big idea in the Tiffany and Ringy chapter 1. Those are the things that you're going to be responsible for. If I don't see that, you're not going to get your full 3 points for this week's class. If you're the fact checker, and you're going to go and look and see what we've posted and say, I'm not sure that's right, or that's on page 53, or if you want more about this, you might want to look at Gonzalez over here, or that's not exactly what Amer says. Amer really says this. So your job is to monitor the conversation and make sure that we're getting the facts right. If you have the job of if you have the job of the summarizer, your job is to come in on Friday and go back over what we've said and say, so in summation, what we think about Acts chapter 1 and 2 is this. We feel this way about Gonzalez and this way about Williams and this way about Amer, and we have approached it this way through Tiffany and Ringy. We find these things helpful with their approach, and we find these things difficult with their approach. So you're going to summarize what we did over the course of the week. If you're in charge of definitions, as words come up, like if you see the word Sitz im Leben, for example, which is a German term, you're going to go look it up, and then you're going to come back and say, by the way, this is what that means. If you want more information, you can find it here. And I don't care if you find it on the web, so long as the information you find on the web is accurate. And of course, I'll be checking on that. If you're the clarifier, you're going to ask the clarifying question. Now, I'm reading this. Do you mean to say it this way, or do you mean to say it that way? What is your intention here? And I'll be going back and checking to make sure you do that at least once. If you're the skeptic, you're going to go, well, you know, we seem to all be agreeing on this, but what about... and so on. So each one of you has a role. The exegete is going to be a new role this week, and your job is to make sure that somehow that connection between the reading in Acts, Stream 1, and the reading in Exegesis, Stream 2, gets connected. In other words, your job is to begin that process of making those connections, and making those connections really well. So you might, in Tiffany and Ringy, say, I come at this from this particular way. How does everybody else come at this? Or where do they get their stuff from? However you want to tie those two readings together, that's your job. The cheerleader's job, and Wilhelmina did a great job of cheering this week, but the cheerleader's job is also to monitor those who haven't posted. So if you see people that haven't posted, it would be good for you to shoot them an email or a message and say, you've been silent on the forums, are you still going to participate? Anyway, I'm hoping we have a good week. I hope this is helpful as you think about how we're going to go forward in the forums, and I look forward to seeing what you do with Tiffany and Ringy in relation to Acts 1 and 2, and also in relation to your particular pericopes. One more thing before we leave. I've had a request from one of you, and I think it's a reasonable request. And the reasonable request is, we'd like to have assignments due, not on Fridays at 6, but on Saturday nights at midnight or Sunday nights at midnight, because we'd like to have the weekend to do more work, because that would work better with our work schedule. If that's true, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up a survey this week. It's going to be underneath the forum and feedback. And I'm going to ask which would be easier for you. Friday at 6, Saturday at midnight, the midnight between Saturday and Sunday. So Sunday at midnight, the midnight between Saturday and Sunday. Or Monday at midnight, the midnight between Sunday and Monday. So which would be easier for you? I need you to go in and fill in that survey. And then the one that the majority of the class fills in, that's the one I will go and say, yes, that's what we'll do. And I'll just change the time. That's not hard for me to do. I'm happy to do it. All right, I will see you in the forums, and I look forward to a good week of conversation. God bless.